Welcome to the channel Reveal Penny USA. What if the smallest coin in your pocket could secretly be connected to a fortune so enormous that most people would never believe it? The 1982 Lincoln penny looks ordinary at first glance, but this particular year is one of the most fascinating years in modern Lincoln cent history, because the mint was dealing with major changes in composition, production, and design details, creating opportunities for unusual pieces to become extremely desirable to collectors. And in the most extraordinary hypothetical valuation discussed for a spectacular, authenticated example, a 1982 Lincoln penny could be associated with a jaw-dropping figure reaching as high as $50 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $50 million. But before you start searching through every penny in your house, there is something incredibly important you need to understand, because not every 1982 penny is worth anything close to that amount, and the difference between an ordinary coin and an extraordinary rarity can come down to details that are almost invisible to the naked eye. The real question is, what exactly would make a 1982 Lincoln penny so special? And could an overlooked example still be hiding in an old collection, a forgotten jar, or a box of coins that nobody has examined for decades? Stay with me until the very end, because we are going to break down the clues collectors would look for, the famous transition surrounding this year, the possible minting errors that can transform an ordinary cent into something extraordinary, and the tiny details that could separate a common penny from a genuine numismatic treasure. And keep watching, because after we uncover the mystery behind this 1982 Lincoln penny, there are two more Lincoln cents waiting in this video, and the story only gets more fascinating as we move forward, especially when we reach the next coin, which comes from a completely different chapter of American coin production. Now, let's go back to 1982, because this was not an ordinary year for the Lincoln cent. The United States Mint was facing a major challenge. Copper prices had become increasingly important, and the cost of producing traditional bronze cents was becoming a serious concern. For decades, Lincoln cents had generally been made with a copper-rich composition, but by 1982 the mint began transitioning toward a copper-plated zinc composition. That transition created something collectors absolutely love: variety. Suddenly, one year could contain multiple legitimate compositions, different weights, different production characteristics, and multiple ways for collectors to identify individual pieces. Think about that for a moment. A coin dated with the exact same year could potentially look almost identical to another coin, while actually being different in composition and weight. That is one of the reasons 1982 is such an important year for Lincoln cent collectors. But here is where the story gets even more interesting. During a transition year, the mint has to manage enormous quantities of coins, different materials, different production processes, and different facilities. Whenever you combine mass production with complicated manufacturing changes, mistakes and unusual pieces can become possible. Some errors can happen when planchets are incorrectly prepared, some can occur when dies strike coins improperly, and others can involve striking problems, off-center strikes, double details, wrong planchets, or unusual combinations that were never supposed to enter circulation. And this is where collectors begin looking very closely. Imagine finding an old 1982 penny at the bottom of a drawer. You pick it up and notice nothing unusual. Lincoln is facing right, the date looks normal, the lettering looks normal, and the reverse shows the familiar Lincoln Memorial. You might put it back without a second thought. But what if the weight is unusual? What if the coin has a rare composition? What if the mint mark, or lack of a mint mark, tells a different story? What if the lettering contains a genuine doubling that was created during the minting process rather than damage caused later? Suddenly, that ordinary-looking penny becomes something worth investigating. Now, let's talk about the $50 million figure, because this is where responsible collectors need to separate sensational claims from actual numismatic evidence. A headline can say a penny is worth millions, but a real valuation depends on authentication, rarity, condition, provenance, auction demand, and whether the claimed variety is actually recognized by professional experts. A normal 1982 Lincoln cent is not automatically worth millions. In reality, most examples are common. The extraordinary figures belong to hypothetical or sensationalized scenarios involving an exceptionally rare, authenticated specimen with characteristics that would make it historically important and extremely desirable. That distinction matters. If you have a 1982 penny, you should not assume you have a $50 million coin simply because of the date. Instead, think like a collector. Ask questions. What is the mint mark? What does the coin weigh? Does it appear to be copper or copper-plated zinc? Are there unusual errors? Is the strike sharp? Is the surface original? Has the coin been cleaned? Is there evidence of damage? Does the doubling appear on multiple devices in a way consistent with a genuine minting variety? These questions can turn casual coin searching into serious treasure hunting. And there is another reason 1982 deserves attention: the year contains multiple major varieties that collectors have studied for decades. Some 1982 cents were struck in the older bronze composition, while later cents used the newer zinc-based composition. This means that a scale capable of measuring a coin accurately can become one of the most useful tools for a collector. Weight alone does not prove rarity, but it can help you identify which type of planchet you may have. And if your coin appears unusual, that is when professional authentication becomes extremely important. You do not want to polish it, scrape it, bend it, or attempt a home repair. Never clean a potentially rare coin. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and can destroy collector value. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges and compare it with trusted references or submit it to a reputable grading and authentication service if the evidence suggests something genuinely unusual. Now imagine a different scenario. Suppose someone inherits a small box of coins from a relative. There is no fancy collection, no expensive display case, just loose cents accumulated over many years. Inside are dozens of Lincoln pennies, including several from 1982. Most look ordinary. One looks slightly different. The owner almost spends it. Then someone notices the color, checks the weight, examines the details under magnification, and suddenly the entire story changes. This is exactly why coin collecting is so addictive. You never know what you might discover until you look. The excitement isn't necessarily that every penny is secretly worth a fortune. The excitement is that rare coins can hide among ordinary objects, and the only way to recognize them is to learn what makes them different. Collectors chase unusual coins because each piece tells a story about how money was manufactured, distributed, circulated, saved, forgotten, and eventually rediscovered. A coin can travel through thousands of hands before landing in a jar in someone's kitchen. It can sit untouched for decades. It can cross states, survive recessions, pass through businesses, and eventually become part of a collection. And when a truly unusual specimen appears, collectors may compete aggressively because there may never be another opportunity to buy one with the same combination of characteristics. Condition is another huge factor. A coin that has spent decades in circulation may have scratches, stains, dents, discoloration, and worn details. A coin preserved in exceptional condition can be dramatically more desirable. But even a high-grade coin must still have something special about it. Condition alone does not magically transform a common cent into a multi-million-dollar rarity. Rarity plus authenticity plus condition plus demand, those are the ingredients that create serious collector interest. And there is one more factor people often overlook: provenance. If an unusual coin has a documented history, especially if it has previously appeared in a respected collection, major auction, or professional examination, that history can strengthen collector confidence. Imagine seeing a coin with paperwork documenting where it came from, who authenticated it, when it was graded, and why specialists believe it is unusual. Compare that with an anonymous penny someone claims is worth millions because they saw a video online. The difference is enormous. This is why serious numismatists rely on evidence, not excitement alone. Still, excitement is part of the hobby, because imagine the moment you discover something you never expected. You turn a coin under a bright light, you see a strange detail, your heart starts beating faster, and suddenly you wonder, could this be real? Maybe it is just damage. Maybe it is machine doubling. Maybe it is discoloration. Or maybe, just maybe, you have found something worth investigating. That uncertainty is what keeps collectors searching. And if you are checking your own coins right now, there are several practical steps you can take. First, separate your 1982 cents from other years. Second, identify whether they have a D mint mark or no mint mark, remembering that the absence of a mint mark on a Philadelphia cent is normal. Third, use an accurate digital scale to compare weight, but don't treat weight as the final answer. Fourth, inspect the date, lettering, Lincoln portrait, and reverse with magnification. Fifth, look for genuine striking abnormalities rather than scratches created after the coin left the mint. And sixth, if something truly unusual appears, seek expert authentication before believing an enormous valuation claim. You should also remember that internet prices can be misleading. A seller listing a coin for $50 million does not mean someone has actually paid $50 million for it. An asking price is not the same thing as an auction result. A viral headline is not the same thing as professional certification. And an alleged discovery is not the same thing as an authenticated rarity. That doesn't make the hunt less exciting, it actually makes it more exciting, because you are learning how to distinguish a real treasure from a dramatic story. Now here is where I want you to think carefully. If you found a 1982 Lincoln penny that looked completely ordinary, would you spend it without checking? Most people probably would. They might drop it into a vending machine, leave it as a tip, or throw it into a jar and forget about it. But a serious collector would stop for a moment and ask, why does this coin look different? What does it weigh? Where was it made? Does it have a recognized variety or error? Those few questions could be the difference between ignoring a coin and discovering something worth further investigation. And remember, we are only at the beginning. The 1982 Lincoln penny is fascinating because it represents a major transition in American coinage, but the next coin in this video takes us into another intriguing period, and when you hear what collectors can look for on that piece, you may start looking at old pennies in a completely different way. I am not going to reveal its shocking value yet, because that number is part of the suspense, but trust me, you will want to stay for it. Before we move forward, check your drawers, old jars, inherited collections, coin albums, and even those forgotten rolls of pennies. Look at the dates. Look at the mint marks. Look at the surfaces. Look for anything that doesn't belong. Because the most valuable discovery isn't always sitting behind glass in a museum, sometimes it is sitting quietly where nobody thinks to look. And if you thought the 1982 Lincoln penny was interesting, wait until we reach the next coin, because we are moving from one fascinating chapter of Lincoln cent history into another, and there is a particular detail that could make collectors stop everything and take a second look. So don't click away yet. The next coin has its own mystery, its own possible varieties, and its own reason for attracting attention from collectors. And remember, I still haven't told you the value connected to that next coin, because I want you to discover the clues first. The 1982 Lincoln penny teaches us a powerful lesson: never judge a coin simply by its face value. 1 cent may look like 1 cent, but history, rarity, manufacturing, condition, and collector demand can completely change the story. So the next time you see a 1982 penny, don't automatically toss it into your spending pile. Pick it up. Turn it over. Look closely. Check the details. Because while most examples are ordinary, the extraordinary possibilities are exactly why collectors keep searching. And now, with that mystery still hanging in the air, we are ready to move to the next Lincoln penny, where the story becomes even more intriguing. Keep watching, because the next coin may have a detail that is incredibly easy to overlook, and if you miss it, you could miss the entire reason collectors care about it. Next, 1975 D Lincoln penny, and if you thought the 1982 cent was fascinating, get ready, because this next coin takes us back to a completely different era of American coin production, a time when millions of Lincoln cents were being struck and released into everyday circulation. Yet tiny differences, unusual strikes, and rare minting mistakes could separate an ordinary penny from a collector's dream. Imagine finding a 1975 D Lincoln penny in an old jar, seeing the tiny D beneath the date, and almost throwing it back into circulation without a second thought, because this coin looks so normal that most people would never stop to inspect it. But what if that ordinary appearance was hiding something extraordinary? Some sensational claims have placed an exceptional 1975 D Lincoln penny at a breathtaking value of up to $60 million, but here is the important part: a normal 1975 D penny is not automatically worth anything remotely close to that amount, and a genuine multi-million-dollar valuation would require an extraordinary, authenticated rarity with characteristics that collectors and professional experts could verify. So before you start celebrating, stay with me, because we are going to uncover exactly what could make a 1975 D penny interesting, what details you should examine, why the Denver Mint matters, and why a tiny difference on a 1-cent coin can create a completely different story. And remember, we still have one more Lincoln penny waiting after this one, and I am saving that final mystery for later, because there is a reason collectors never stop checking old cents even when the coin appears completely ordinary. The story of the 1975 D Lincoln penny begins in Denver, Colorado, at the United States Mint facility that produced enormous quantities of circulating coins for the American public. By 1975, the Lincoln cent had already been part of American life for decades, carrying the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. To most people, these pennies were simply spending money, something used to make exact change at a store or dropped into a drawer after a purchase. But to collectors, every coin produced by a mint is a small piece of history. The D Mint mark is particularly important because it tells you that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. That little letter may look insignificant, but when collectors organize coins by year and mint, it becomes one of the first details they check. Now, 1975 was not known simply because it was the year before the United States bicentennial era exploded into public attention. It was also part of a period when the mint was producing enormous numbers of coins to meet everyday demand. And whenever you have mass production on a gigantic scale, you have opportunities for variation. Machines run continuously, dies experience wear, planchets move through production equipment, striking pressure can vary, and occasional errors can happen. Most mistakes are caught and removed before coins enter circulation, but some can escape quality control. That is where the collector's eye becomes important. A normal 1975 D penny has a familiar appearance, but an unusual example could potentially show characteristics such as an off-center strike, a clipped planchet, a die crack, a doubled feature, an abnormal strike, or another genuine minting error. However, there is a major warning here: not every strange-looking coin is a mint error. Coins spend years being handled, dropped, scratched, scraped, heated, chemically exposed, and damaged by machines after leaving the mint. A scratch across Lincoln's face is not automatically a rare error. A dent is not automatically a mint mistake. Discoloration does not automatically mean rarity. Collectors learn to distinguish between something that happened during production and something that happened after the coin entered circulation. That distinction can completely change the value. Imagine two 1975 D pennies sitting side by side. One has a deep scratch across the date caused by years of circulation. The other has a genuine striking anomaly that occurred while the coin was being manufactured. To an untrained eye, both coins might look damaged. To an experienced numismatist, they could tell completely different stories. This is why magnification and careful observation matter. You want to examine the date, the D Mint mark, Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the rim, and especially the areas where metal flow can reveal something unusual. A genuine mint error often has a logical relationship with the manufacturing process. The metal may have flowed in an unusual direction. A portion of the design may be missing because of the way the planchet was prepared. The entire coin may be shifted relative to the dies. Or a die problem may repeat a distinctive feature across multiple coins. The key is evidence. Now, let's talk about the sensational $60 million figure. If you have heard claims that a 1975 Lincoln penny is worth $60 million, you need to understand that such a figure should be treated as a dramatic hypothetical or promotional valuation unless supported by a verifiable, documented sale. A coin's true market value is established through actual transactions, expert authentication, rarity, condition, provenance, and collector demand. An internet listing asking for an enormous amount of money does not prove that a buyer paid that amount. A video headline does not prove an auction record. And a coin simply being old does not make it extraordinarily valuable. This is important because the real treasure hunting lesson is much more useful than simply believing a huge number. If you learn what to look for, you can examine coins intelligently instead of relying on sensational claims. Think about the possibilities. You find a 1975 penny in a collection inherited from a grandparent. The coin has been stored in a small envelope for decades. You notice that the surfaces appear unusually clean, the details are sharp, and something about the strike looks different. You take a second look. Then a third. You compare it with another 1975 cent. Suddenly, you notice that the rim doesn't look quite right. Maybe the coin is slightly off-center. Maybe the lettering has an unusual appearance. Maybe there is a visible die crack. Maybe there is an unusual planchet characteristic. At this point, you have something worth investigating. You don't declare yourself a millionaire. You don't polish the coin. You don't sell it to the first person who makes an offer. Instead, you document it, photograph it, compare it with reputable references, and if the evidence is compelling, you seek professional authentication. That is how serious collectors approach potentially valuable coins. Condition also plays an enormous role. A circulated 1975 penny may show wear across Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and clothing details. The reverse may have worn lettering and a softened memorial. A coin preserved with exceptional original surfaces can be dramatically more desirable than a heavily circulated example, especially if it also possesses a recognized rarity. But again, condition is only one piece of the puzzle. A perfectly preserved common coin is still common. A rare variety in excellent condition can be a completely different story. And then there is provenance. Imagine a rare 1975 cent with a documented chain of ownership stretching back decades. Maybe it was part of an established collection, appeared in a respected auction, and was professionally certified. That history can make collectors much more confident that the coin is authentic and significant. Compare that with a loose penny being offered online with no documentation and a giant price tag. Serious buyers know the difference. The 1975 Lincoln penny also reminds us of something fascinating about coin collecting. Sometimes the most important clue is the one people overlook because it is too small. The D mint mark is tiny. The edge of a planchet can be tiny. A doubling feature can be microscopic. A die crack may look like a hairline. Yet these tiny details can determine whether a coin deserves further attention. That is why collectors use magnifying glasses, digital microscopes, scales, reference books, and professional grading services. You don't need expensive equipment to begin. Even a basic magnifier and a good light can reveal details you would never notice with the naked eye. But don't let the excitement make you careless. Never clean a potentially valuable coin. Never scrape away dirt to reveal a date. Never use chemicals to make the surface shine. And never assume that because a coin looks unusual it must be rare. The original surface of a coin is part of its history, and cleaning can permanently reduce collector appeal. There is another fascinating possibility to consider: what happens when a coin has an error that is visually dramatic? Those are the coins that can attract attention quickly. A strong off-center strike can be obvious. A major clipped planchet can change the shape of the coin. A dramatic die break can create a raised line or unusual area of metal. But even then, authentication matters. Collectors want to know whether the feature was created by the mint or by someone after the coin entered circulation. That is why the phrase mint error is so powerful, but also so frequently misunderstood. A genuine error means something went wrong during the manufacturing process. Post-mint damage means something happened later. The two can look surprisingly similar. And that is exactly why professional opinions can be valuable when a coin appears exceptional. Now imagine a collector standing at a coin show, holding a 1975 D cent under magnification. Around them are trays filled with thousands of coins. Most are worth modest amounts. Some are more desirable. A few are genuinely scarce. The collector turns the penny over, checks the date, examines the mint mark, studies the rim, and compares the strike with known examples. For a moment, everything else disappears. The question becomes simple: what is this? That moment is what coin collecting is all about. It is not merely about money. It is about discovery. It is about finding something that thousands of other people overlooked. And sometimes, the story of a coin becomes more valuable than the coin itself. Think about how many 1975 D pennies have traveled through American commerce. They may have been used at grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, vending machines, parking meters, and countless other places. Some were lost under furniture. Some were placed into piggy banks. Some were thrown into drawers and forgotten. Others entered collections. Decades later, collectors began examining them with fresh eyes. That is why your own old coins can be worth checking, not because every penny is secretly worth millions, but because you never know what unusual characteristic might be hiding among thousands of ordinary pieces. And this brings us to a powerful question: how many people have already spent a coin they should have examined? Probably more than we will ever know. Someone could have held an unusual penny and never recognized it. Someone could have inherited a collection and sold it without checking the varieties. Someone could have found an error coin and assumed it was damaged. That possibility creates the FOMO that keeps collectors searching. The next time you receive a handful of change, slow down. Look at the dates. Look at the mint marks. Compare similar coins. Search for unusual strikes. And if you discover something that genuinely appears rare, protect it before doing anything else. Now, there is one more thing I want you to remember before we move toward the final coin in this sequence. The 1975 D penny is a perfect example of why a coin's value is not written on its face. The number 1 cent is printed nowhere as a guarantee of what collectors will pay. Market value depends on what the coin actually is. Rarity creates interest. Authentication creates confidence. Condition affects desirability. Provenance adds history. And competition among collectors can drive prices dramatically higher when an exceptionally rare piece appears. So when you hear someone claim that a certain penny is worth tens of millions, don't simply believe the headline, become the investigator. Ask for evidence. Ask whether there is a verified auction record. Ask whether the coin has been professionally authenticated. Ask what specific variety or error creates the rarity. Those questions protect you from misinformation while also making you a smarter collector. And if you have been following along carefully, you know that this is not the end of our journey. We have already traveled from the fascinating transition year of 1982 to the 1975 D cent and its potential varieties, but there is still one more Lincoln penny waiting for us. I am not going to reveal its final value yet, because the mystery is part of the fun, but I will tell you this: the final coin comes from another important year, and its story gives us another reason to examine seemingly ordinary pennies with extreme attention. So before you leave this video, take a second look at your own collection. Do you have old Lincoln cents? Do you have coins with unusual marks? Do you have pennies inherited from family members? Have you ever checked the mint marks? Maybe there is nothing unusual there, and that's completely fine. But what if there is something you overlooked? What if the coin you assumed was worthless has a legitimate variety? What if the tiny detail you ignored is the exact detail another collector would recognize immediately? That is the mystery. And now we are getting closer to the final coin, the one that will bring this entire journey to its biggest moment. The 1975 D Lincoln penny has shown us why mint location, production methods, errors, condition, and authentication matter. But the next coin will give us another fascinating opportunity to ask the same question: could something hiding in plain sight be far more interesting than it first appears? So don't go anywhere, because our final Lincoln penny is still waiting, and I promise you, the details are what make this hobby so addictive. Next, 1987 Lincoln penny, and this is where our journey reaches its grand finale, because after exploring the fascinating world of the 1982 Lincoln cent and the 1975 D Lincoln penny, we arrive at another ordinary-looking coin that can become extremely interesting when you know exactly what to examine. Imagine finding a 1987 Lincoln penny in an old collection, seeing nothing more than a familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, and almost dropping it into a spending pile. But what if there were a genuine minting error, an unusual variety, exceptional preservation, or another documented characteristic hiding beneath that ordinary appearance? Some sensational claims have placed an extraordinary 1987 Lincoln penny at a staggering potential figure of up to $70 million, but before that number gets your imagination running wild, remember the most important rule of serious coin collecting: a normal 1987 penny is not automatically worth millions. An extraordinary valuation would require an exceptionally rare, authenticated specimen supported by real evidence, and that distinction is absolutely critical. So today, we are going to look beyond the headline and uncover what makes a 1987 Lincoln cent worth investigating, why collectors examine these coins so carefully, what kinds of errors can create genuine interest, and how you can avoid confusing ordinary damage with a real minting mistake. Because sometimes the difference between a common coin and a remarkable one is so small that you could hold it in your hand and never notice it. And if you have ever wondered why collectors spend hours searching through boxes of pennies, this is exactly why. The year 1987 belongs to an important period in the history of the Lincoln cent, a time when the familiar design had already become one of the most recognizable pieces of American currency. Lincoln had appeared on the cent since 1909, and by the late 20th century the coin had become deeply embedded in everyday American life. Children saved pennies in jars, families accumulated them in drawers, businesses kept them in cash registers, and millions disappeared into couches, cars, and old containers. To most people, a penny was simply a penny. But to collectors, a dated coin with a particular mint mark, strike characteristic, condition, or error can tell a much bigger story. That is why the 1987 Lincoln penny deserves a closer look. The first thing you should understand is that the date itself does not automatically make the coin rare. Millions of 1987 Lincoln cents were produced, and ordinary circulated examples generally have modest collector value. The excitement begins when a particular specimen contains something genuinely unusual. And there are several categories collectors watch for: striking errors, planchet errors, die varieties, unusual doubling, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, broad strikes, and other production anomalies. But here is the critical part: not everything that looks different is a mint error. This is one of the biggest mistakes beginners make. A scratch can look like doubling. A dent can look like a strike problem. Chemical discoloration can make a coin look like it has a rare composition. A damaged rim can be mistaken for a clipped planchet. Post-mint damage is everywhere, because coins spend years being carried, dropped, stacked, scraped, washed, and exposed to countless environments. The job of the collector is to determine whether the unusual feature was created at the mint or happened later. That is where the real detective work begins. Imagine you find a 1987 Lincoln penny and notice something strange around the date. Maybe one digit seems thicker than another. Maybe the lettering looks slightly shifted. Maybe the edge appears unusual. Your first instinct might be, this has to be rare. But a professional collector would slow down. They would use magnification. They would compare the coin with known examples. They would inspect whether the feature shows characteristics consistent with a genuine die variety or minting error. They would ask whether the metal itself has flowed around the feature in a way that makes sense. They would check whether the anomaly is raised or incuse, whether it repeats in a pattern, and whether it could simply be damage. That careful process is what separates serious numismatics from internet speculation. Now let's return to the astonishing $70 million figure. If you have heard a claim that a 1987 Lincoln penny is worth $70 million, understand that this is a sensational figure, not a standard value for ordinary 1987 cents. A legitimate market valuation would need to be supported by professional authentication and credible transaction evidence. An asking price online does not prove market value. A viral video does not establish an auction record. A social media post does not authenticate a coin. And simply saying a coin is rare does not make it rare. But that doesn't mean you should ignore your 1987 pennies. In fact, it means you should learn what to look for. The fascinating part is that even a coin worth only a small amount can teach you something about minting history, while a truly unusual specimen can become a serious collector piece. One of the first things to check is the mint mark. Depending on where the coin was produced, the presence or absence of a mint mark can help identify its origin. A 1987 D Lincoln cent, for example, has the D associated with the Denver Mint, while Philadelphia-produced cents traditionally have no mint mark. That little distinction is one of the first clues collectors use when organizing Lincoln cents. Next, examine the strike. Does Lincoln's portrait appear properly centered? Is the rim complete? Does the reverse design appear fully struck? Is there an unusual amount of metal outside the normal design area? Does the coin appear stretched or shifted? A dramatic off-center strike can be immediately noticeable, while a subtle error may require magnification. Then inspect the date and lettering. Genuine doubling can be valuable depending on the specific variety, but not every appearance of a second image is true double die evidence. Machine doubling can create flattened or shelf-like secondary impressions that are often mistaken for valuable doubling. Again, knowledge matters. This is why experienced collectors don't rush to conclusions. They compare, research, and authenticate. Now imagine the most exciting possible discovery scenario. You are cleaning out an old family storage box. Inside is a small envelope marked simply "Pennies." You open it and discover a collection assembled decades ago. There are common Lincoln cents, wheat cents, and several later date memorial cents. Near the bottom is a 1987 penny that looks slightly different. You place it under a magnifying glass. Suddenly, you notice a feature that doesn't appear on the other coins. Your heart starts racing. You check the weight. You examine the rim. You compare the lettering. You search reference images. You still aren't sure. And that moment, the moment before you know whether you found something real, is one of the greatest thrills in coin collecting. The smart move is not to announce that you're rich. The smart move is to protect the coin and get it examined. Don't polish it. Don't rub it with a cloth. Don't scrape away dirt. Don't use vinegar, chemicals, or household cleaners. And don't let someone convince you to sell it immediately for a tiny amount before professional examination. If the coin really is unusual, documentation matters. A reputable grading and authentication service can determine whether the coin has a recognized variety, error, or other collectible characteristic. Condition matters too. A 1987 penny that has circulated for decades may show scratches, stains, and worn details. An uncirculated specimen can look dramatically different, with sharper details and more original surface quality. But again, condition doesn't turn a common coin into a $70 million treasure. The coin needs something genuinely rare to justify extraordinary attention. This is where the concept of supply and demand becomes fascinating. Suppose a particular error is extremely rare. Perhaps only a handful of authenticated examples are known. Now imagine several major collectors want the same coin. Suddenly, competition can become intense. Collectors aren't simply buying metal. They are buying rarity, history, uniqueness, and the opportunity to own something very few other people can possess. That's why certain coins can sell for far more than their face value. The coin itself might contain only a tiny amount of metal, but its numismatic value can be enormous because of the story attached to it. And the story of the 1987 Lincoln penny is particularly interesting because it belongs to a familiar era. It isn't an ancient coin from a lost civilization. It isn't a gold coin recovered from a shipwreck. It is something people may have carried in their pockets during ordinary life. That makes the possibility of discovery feel much closer to home. Think about how many 1987 pennies could still be sitting inside old collections. Some are probably in albums. Some are in jars. Some are in inherited boxes. Some are mixed together with other dates. Some may be forgotten in storage for decades. And perhaps a few unusual examples have never been properly examined. That's the part that keeps collectors searching. They know most coins won't be rare, but they also know that unusual pieces can sometimes survive unnoticed for years. The key is knowing what you're looking at. Let's talk about errors more deeply, because this is where many collectors become fascinated. An off-center strike occurs when the planchet isn't properly aligned with the dies, producing a design that is shifted toward one side. The more dramatic and legitimate the error, the more visually interesting it can become. A clipped planchet occurs when the metal strip used to create planchets is punched in a way that leaves a missing section of the coin. Again, authentication is important because damage can imitate these characteristics. A die crack can appear as a raised line caused by deterioration or cracking of the die. Over time, repeated strikes can create increasingly visible features. A broad strike can occur when a coin is struck without the normal collar restraint, potentially creating an unusually wide appearance. These are examples of the kinds of characteristics collectors may investigate, but every individual coin must be evaluated on its own evidence. And then there are planchet-related anomalies. If the wrong type of blank enters the striking process, a coin can end up with a composition or appearance that was not intended for that denomination. Such pieces can be highly interesting because they document a mistake in the production chain. But once again, a simple color difference is not enough. Metal composition must be scientifically evaluated when necessary. A coin can change color because of environmental exposure, oxidation, chemicals, heat, or other factors. Professional testing may be required to establish what the coin actually contains. This is why the most exciting coin discoveries often begin with a simple question rather than a huge price tag. What is this? That question leads to research. Research leads to comparison. Comparison leads to authentication. Authentication leads to a legitimate valuation. And sometimes, after all that work, the answer is that the coin is common. But that's still useful, because you've learned something. Other times, the answer is that the coin has a recognized variety or error. And that's when the excitement becomes real. Now think about the three coins we've explored. The 1982 Lincoln penny showed us the importance of a major composition transition and the different varieties associated with that year. The 1975 Lincoln penny reminded us how mint location, production, errors, condition, and authentication can influence collector interest. And now the 1987 Lincoln penny brings us to the final lesson: never underestimate the importance of careful examination. The headline might say millions, but the real treasure is the knowledge that allows you to determine whether a coin deserves attention. If you're searching your collection, don't start by looking for money. Start by looking for differences. Separate coins by year. Separate them by mint mark. Compare similar examples. Use a magnifier. Check weights when appropriate. Study the rim. Study the strike. Look at the date. Look at the lettering. Inspect the reverse. Take clear photographs. Keep potentially interesting pieces protected. And most importantly, don't alter them. A rare coin's original condition is part of its identity. If you damage the surface while trying to make it look better, you could make the coin less desirable. Now here's a question for you. If someone handed you a 1987 Lincoln penny today, would you actually inspect it, or would you spend it without thinking? Most people would probably spend it. That's exactly why coin collecting can be so fascinating. The vast majority of coins are ordinary, but the possibility of discovering an unusual specimen encourages people to slow down and look. Maybe you'll find nothing. Maybe you'll find a minor variety. Maybe you'll discover a genuine error worth professional examination. You simply won't know until you check. And that's why the phrase, "check your change," has become so popular among collectors. It isn't a guarantee of instant wealth. It's an invitation to pay attention. The $70 million figure attached to this story should therefore be viewed as a sensational maximum claim rather than the ordinary market value of a 1987 Lincoln penny. If someone tells you your common 1987 cent is automatically worth $70 million, be skeptical. Ask for documentation. Ask what exact error or variety is responsible. Ask whether the coin has been professionally certified. Ask whether the price comes from a verified sale or merely an internet listing. Those questions could save you from disappointment, and they could also help you recognize a genuinely important coin if you ever encounter one. Because the truth is, serious collectors aren't searching for headlines. They are searching for evidence. They want to know what happened at the mint, why the coin is different, how rare the characteristic really is, and whether experts agree about its identity. That's what makes the hobby so rewarding. Every coin becomes a miniature investigation. Every date is a clue. Every mint mark is a clue. Every unusual feature is a clue. And sometimes, when all the clues line up, you discover something truly special. So take one final look through your penny jar. Look through those old albums. Ask your family if they have inherited coin collections. Check the boxes that haven't been opened in years. Don't clean anything unusual. Don't throw anything away simply because it looks ordinary. And if you discover a 1987 Lincoln penny with a strange characteristic, document it carefully and seek expert guidance before believing any enormous valuation. The most important thing to remember is that rarity must be proven, not imagined. A coin doesn't become valuable because somebody gives it a dramatic number. It becomes valuable when its identity, rarity, condition, authenticity, and market demand are supported by evidence. And that brings us to the end of our three-coin journey. We started with the fascinating 1982 Lincoln cent and its historic composition transition, moved into the 1975 Lincoln penny and the importance of mint location and genuine errors, and finally arrived at the 1987 Lincoln penny, where careful examination becomes the ultimate lesson. Whether you ever discover a valuable error or simply become better at recognizing the coins in your pocket, you've gained something that every serious collector understands: knowledge is the real treasure. So the next time a Lincoln penny lands in your hand, don't immediately dismiss it because it's only worth 1 cent. Turn it over. Look at the date. Check the mint mark. Examine the rim. Study the strike. Ask yourself, what am I looking at? Because somewhere among billions of ordinary coins, unusual pieces have survived, and the people who discover them are usually the ones who took the time to look. And that is the real magic of coin collecting. A tiny piece of metal can connect you to American history, manufacturing, economics, art, and human curiosity all at once. If you enjoyed this journey through the world of Lincoln pennies, make sure you keep searching, keep learning, and most importantly, keep your eyes open. You never know when an ordinary-looking penny might give you a reason to stop, look twice, and ask the question every collector loves most: could this be something special?